The wind howled through the broken skeletons of once great skyscrapers, carrying with it the ghostly whispers of a world long dead. What had once been the bustling heart of human civilization was now a desolate wasteland. The cities of Earth lay in ruins, their gleaming towers reduced to rubble, their streets choked with ash and silence. There was no sign of life, no birds, no animals, not even the hum of machines that had once filled these streets. The only sound was the wind and the echo of a lone pair of boots crunching through the debris. A solitary figure moved through the devastation, his tall, armored form casting a long shadow in the dying light of the sun. He was a living relic, a remnant of a species that had once stretched its reach across the stars, a warrior forged in the fires of countless battles, and now he was the last. Orion, the eternal guardian of Earth, his face, chiseled and unyielding, remained expressionless as he surveyed the landscape before him. Eyes that had seen centuries of war and suffering flicked over the ruined cityscape, searching for any sign of movement. His armor, a patchwork of human and alien technology, glinted dully under the fading sunlight, scarred and battered but still functional. In his hand, he held a massive energy blade, its edge humming softly with contained power. He was alone, as he had been for centuries, the last defender of a world that no longer had anyone to protect. Orion's patrol took him through what had once been New York City, now a skeletal husk of crumbling steel and shattered glass. He moved silently, every sense on high alert. He had walked these streets 1,000 times, but he never let his guard down. Not anymore. The alien raiders came often, scavengers and marauders who descended on Earth like vultures, seeking to strip the planet of anything valuable. To them, Earth was nothing more than a tomb to be pillaged, a graveyard filled with the relics of a fallen race. But Orion was there to ensure they found nothing. Suddenly, he froze. There, a faint shimmer in the air, a flicker of movement among the shadows. His grip tightened on his blade, his muscles coiling like a spring. He knew that shimmer all too well. A cloaking field, alien in design. Someone was here. Without a sound, Orion vanished into the ruins, his armor's stealth systems activating in a whisper of motion. He darted through the crumbling buildings, his eyes narrowing as he caught glimpses of his enemy. Alien figures, tall and thin, their skin a sickly blue-green, moved silently through the wreckage. There were a dozen of them, their armor sleek and dark, weapons bristling with unfamiliar technology. Var, Orion muttered under his breath, recognizing the species. Nomadic raiders, vicious and cruel, but what were they doing here? He watched as they spread out, their leader barking commands in a guttural tongue. They were searching for something. But what? Orion's gaze hardened. It didn't matter. Whatever they sought, they wouldn't leave with it. With a sudden burst of speed, Orion leapt from his hiding place, his blade flashing in the dim light. He crashed into the nearest alien, his sword cleaving through its chest in a burst of energy. The creature shrieked, its body convulsing as it crumpled to the ground. The others whirled around, weapons raised, but Orion was already among them. He moved like a whirlwind, a blur of death and steel. His blade cut through armor and flesh alike, each strike precise and devastating. The aliens fired wildly, energy blasts scorching the air, but Orion weaved between them, his movements impossibly fast. One by one, the raiders fell, their blood staining the ground. Within moments, it was over. Orion stood alone once more, surrounded by the bodies of his enemies. He breathed heavily, his gaze sweeping over the fallen. It had been a small skirmish, barely worth his effort. But something about the raiders' presence nagged at him. Why were they here? What were they looking for? He bent down, inspecting the body of the raider leader. Its armor was marked with a strange insignia, a jagged symbol etched into the metal. Orion's eyes narrowed. He hadn't seen this symbol before. It was new. As Orion straightened, the hairs on the back of his neck prickled. He spun around, blade raised, but the street behind him was empty, nothing but rubble and darkness. And yet, he could feel it, a presence, something watching him from the shadows. "Show yourself," he growled, his voice echoing through the empty city. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, a figure stepped out of the darkness. It was tall, taller than any human, its form wrapped in a cloak of shimmering black. Its face was hidden, but Orion could see the gleam of red eyes staring back at him. "You fight well, human," the figure said soft, its voice like the hiss of a snake. "But you are alone, and you are weak." Orion's grip tightened on his blade. "Who are you?" "A harbinger," the figure replied, its gaze never wavering. "Your world is dying, and soon even you will be nothing but dust." "Not while I stand," Orion shot back. The figure chuckled, a low, mocking sound. "We shall see." Without another word, it turned and melted back into the shadows, disappearing as if it had never been there. Orion stood still for a long time, staring after the figure. His heart hammered in his chest, but not from fear. No, what he felt was something else entirely. A warning. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't alone, and it was coming for him. As the city fell silent once more, Orion knelt beside the fallen raider leader and ripped the strange insignia from its armor. He held it up, studying the jagged lines and sharp angles. "I need answers," he murmured to himself. If there was a new force at work in the galaxy, targeting Earth, then he had to know the symbol. It was more than just a mark. It was a sign of something larger. He slipped the insignia into a compartment on his armor and rose to his feet. The figure's words echoed in his mind. "Your world is dying, and soon, even you will be nothing but dust." Orion turned, his gaze sweeping over the ruined cityscape. He had defended this world for centuries, fought off countless invaders, and yet he had never felt so alone, so small. But he would not give up. Not now. Not ever. "Come then," he whispered to the empty sky. "I'll be waiting." With that, Orion turned and strode back into the ruins, his silhouette fading into the darkness as the first stars of the night began to shine above the broken skyline. Let them come. He was the last human, and he would not fall. Orion moved through the empty streets with purpose, the strange insignia clutched tightly in his gloved hand. He knew where he needed to go. There was only one place left on Earth where the answers might be found, a place buried deep beneath the ground, hidden from the prying eyes of the alien scavengers that haunted this world. He descended into the ruins of what had once been the central library, its grand entrance shattered and half buried under the weight of collapsed buildings. The vast halls, once filled with the hum of human knowledge, were now silent tombs of broken glass and crumbling walls. But Orion ignored the decay. He knew this place well, had known it back when it had been a beacon of learning, a center of Earth's intellectual might, and he knew its secrets. He stepped over fallen pillars and shattered displays, making his way to the back of the library. There, hidden beneath a mound of debris, was a hatch, a small, unassuming doorway that led to the underground archives, a secure vault that housed the most sensitive data humanity had ever gathered. Data on the many alien species they had encountered, alliances they had forged, and threats they had faced. The hatch groaned as he forced it open, dust and rust flaking away. A long, dark tunnel stretched out before him, lined with flickering emergency lights. He activated his helmet's visor, switching to low-light vision, and began his descent. Minutes later, he stood before a massive door, its surface engraved with the emblem of the old Earth Defense Corps, the seal of humanity's last military force. With a hiss, the door slid open, and Orion stepped into a cavernous chamber. Rows upon rows of holographic storage units lined the walls, each one filled with the knowledge and history of Earth's golden age. And in the center, a single towering console stood waiting. "Let's see what secrets you've kept hidden," Orion murmured, inserting the alien insignia into the console's scanner. The console hummed to life, and a holographic display flared into existence, filling the room with a soft blue glow. Alien symbols and images danced before his eyes, data streams twisting and merging as the archive processed the input. Finally, a single word appeared, glowing ominously against the dark backdrop: Vorthak. Orion's jaw tightened. He had heard whispers of the Vorthak long ago, before Earth had fallen. They were conquerors, a race that had swept across entire star systems, enslaving or exterminating any species that stood in their way. But they had vanished centuries ago, disappearing without a trace, and now they were back. Orion's fingers danced over the console, bringing up more data on the Vorthak. Reports from long-dead human scouts, fragmented transmissions intercepted by Earth's intelligence networks, images of Vorthak ships, sleek and deadly, their hulls marked with the same jagged insignia he now held in his hand. But there was more, a series of cryptic references buried deep in the archives, hidden in old battle logs and intelligence reports. A project, codenamed Eclipse, linked to the Vorthak's sudden disappearance all those years ago. Eclipse? Orion muttered, narrowing his eyes. What had humanity known about the Vorthak that could have made them vanish so completely? The answer came in the form of a single, chilling message, buried deep within the archive's databanks. It was a warning, broadcast across all frequencies in the final days of the war. The words burned into Orion's mind as he read them. The Vorthak seek not just to conquer, but to erase. They want to wipe humanity from existence, not just physically, but from memory. They will destroy our history, our achievements, our very identity. They want to make it as if we never existed at all. A shiver ran down Orion's spine. That was why the raiders had been here. They weren't scavenging for resources. They were searching for the remnants of human culture, looking to destroy whatever pieces of humanity's past remain. And that meant they weren't just attacking Earth, they were attacking its legacy. Orion straightened, his grip tightening on the edge of the console. He had thought his duty was to protect the physical remains of his world. But now he understood. It was something much greater. He had to protect humanity's memory, its soul. Because if the Vorthak succeeded, it would be as if humanity had never existed. The revelation weighed heavily on Orion's shoulders as he stood alone in the darkened archive. Memories of the past washed over him. Memories of a time when humanity had been a proud, thriving race. Its people united in purpose and vision. He could still see their faces. His friends, his comrades in arms, the leaders who had once inspired billions to reach for the stars. All gone, all lost. And now, even the memory of their existence was at risk. Was he really enough to protect them? One man, standing against an entire race of conquerors bent on erasing every trace of his people. Am I enough? He whispered to the silence. For centuries, he had fought alone, driven by duty and honor. But for the first time, doubt gnawed at him. What if he failed? What if he wasn't strong enough? What if, in the end, the Vorthak succeeded in erasing everything he had ever known and loved? His gaze drifted to the holographic images still flickering around him. Scenes from Earth's past, from the golden age of humanity's expansion into the cosmos. The first colony ships lifting off into the sky. The construction of massive space stations that had once circled distant worlds. Families, children, living and laughing under the sun's warm light. No, he couldn't let it end here. He couldn't let them be forgotten. I will not fail, he growled, his voice hardening. I am Orion, guardian of Earth, and I will protect its legacy, no matter the cost. The doubt melted away, replaced by cold resolve. He would face the Vorthak. He would fight them with everything he had. And if he died, then he would die, knowing that he had given everything to protect his people. Orion turned back to the console, his gaze blazing with determination. The Vorthak wanted to erase humanity, then he would make them pay. Every last one of them. He pulled up the archive's map of the solar system, scanning the data for any human outposts or installations that might still be operational. There, an old human outpost on the moon, marked as Lunar Station Alpha. It had been abandoned long before Earth fell, a relic of humanity's early expansion into space. But if the Vorthak were searching for human relics, then the station would be their next target. Lunar Station Alpha, Orion murmured, his mind racing. If I can reach it before they do, I can fortify it, make a stand. It was a long shot. The station's defenses were probably in disrepair, its systems barely functional, but it was a chance to draw the Vorthak to him, to make them face him directly. And if he could destroy their fleet there, he could cripple their efforts to erase humanity forever. I'm coming for you, Vorthak, he whispered, turning away from the console. Let's see if you're ready to face Earth's final guardian. Orion stepped out of the archive and into the ruins above, the weight of his mission pressing down on him. He knew what he had to do. The Vorthak were powerful, relentless, and ruthless. But he was a warrior of Earth, the last human, and he would not let them win. He glanced up at the darkening sky, his jaw clenched. The moon hung above him, a pale sliver of light in the fading dusk. Time to move, he said softly, activating his armor systems. With a roar, his engines flared to life, propelling him into the air. He shot upwards, leaving the ruined city behind as he ascended into the heavens. The final battle was coming, and Orion would be ready. As the Earth fell away beneath him, Orion's gaze fixed on the distant moon. The Vorthak thought they could erase humanity's legacy, but he would show them what it meant to stand against the last defender of Earth. The ancient lunar outpost loomed before him, a dark silhouette against the stark, gray landscape of the moon. Orion hovered in the vacuum of space, his visor reflecting the massive, dust-covered structure. Lunar Station Alpha was old, far older than anything else humanity had left behind. It had been one of the first bases built during humanity's push into the stars, a symbol of hope and expansion. Now, it was a crumbling ruin, long since abandoned. Its defense grids were offline, its power reserves barely functional. But to Orion, it was more than just a relic. It was the last piece of humanity's legacy still standing. Orion descended to the surface, his boots landing softly in the lunar dust. He gazed at the outpost, the memories of its history flooding back to him. This was where the first moon-to-Earth shuttles had launched, where humanity had taken its first steps toward becoming a true, space-faring race. Now, it would become a battlefield once more. Let's see what you have left, he murmured, striding toward the main entrance. The heavy metal doors creaked open at his touch, a cloud of dust billowing out. Orion stepped inside, the dim emergency lights flickering weakly. The air was stale, the corridors silent, but the old systems were still there, waiting. With a few deft movements, Orion accessed the control console, bringing up a map of the facility. Main defenses offline. Power at 12%. Automated turrets disabled, he muttered, scrolling through the list of malfunctioning systems. It was worse than he'd feared, but there was still hope. He activated his communicator. Lunar Station Alpha. This is Orion. I need a status report on any operational defense units. For a long moment, there was only static. Then, a crackling voice echoed through the silence. Orion, Guardian of Earth. Designation confirmed. Welcome back. Orion's heart leapt. Who is this? Designated Sentinel AI. Designation Valhalla, the voice replied. I am the last operational intelligence unit of Lunar Station Alpha. Orion's grip tightened on the console. Valhalla, I need every remaining resource the station has. The Vorthak are coming. They'll be here soon. Understood, Valhalla responded calmly. Activating all remaining defense protocols. Welcome back, Guardian. It is an honor to serve. As the old systems whirred to life, Orion glanced up at the dark expanse of space. The Vorthak would be coming soon, drawn by the beacon of human technology. He had little time to prepare, but he would make every second count. Orion moved quickly, his hands flying over the control panels as he reactivated every dormant system he could find. Turrets, force fields, kinetic barriers. Anything that could be brought online was powered up and routed to the station's remaining energy reserves. But it still wouldn't be enough for us away. Valhalla, Orion said sharp. Are there any other units in the system? Anything that could reinforce the outpost? Scanning, the AI responded. After a brief pause, it continued. One signal detected. Coordinates locked. Approach at your discretion. Orion's gaze snapped to the screen. A single dot blinked on the radar, hovering just outside the station's perimeter. It was small, barely more than a blip, but there was something about it that felt familiar. Let's check it out, he muttered, striding out of the command center. He moved swiftly through the corridors, his steps echoing in the empty halls. When he reached the main hangar, the doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a single massive form standing in the darkness. It was a war machine, a towering metal behemoth nearly twice his height. Its armor was dull and battered, its joints stiff from centuries of disuse. But as Orion approached, its eyes flickered to life, glowing a deep, menacing red. Identify yourself, the machine growled, its voice deep and metallic. Orion raised his hands slowly. I am Orion, Guardian of Earth. Designation, last human. I need your help. The machine studied him for a long moment, then stepped forward, its massive frame shaking the ground. Designation confirmed. I am Atlas, last of the Vanguard-class war machines. I am honored to fight by your side. Orion's chest tightened. He remembered the Vanguard units. They had been humanity's greatest defenders during the early wars, living weapons designed to protect entire worlds. And now, this one was all that remained. We're facing a full-scale invasion, Orion said quietly. The Vorthak are coming to erase humanity's memory. Will you stand with me? Atlas straightened, his armor creaking. I am a defender of Earth. I will stand until I fall. A grim smile tugged at Orion's lips. Good. But Atlas wasn't alone. As the hangar lights flickered on, two more war machines stepped out of the shadows, smaller than Atlas, but just as deadly. They bowed their heads respectfully, their eyes glowing in the dim light. Designation, Ares, one rumbled. Designation, Athena, the other added. Orion looked at each in turn. Then let's show them what happens when they threaten Earth. The hours that followed were a blur of activity. Orion, Atlas, Ares, and Athena worked tirelessly to fortify the outpost, using whatever scraps and salvage they could find. Walls were reinforced, choke points established, and defensive turrets calibrated for maximum efficiency. But, despite their efforts, Orion knew it wouldn't be enough. The Vorthak fleet that was approaching was massive, far larger than anything he had faced before, and they were bringing their full might to bear. We don't have the firepower to hold them off indefinitely, Orion said grimly, scanning the tactical display. But we don't need to win. We just need to make them bleed. Understood, Atlas rumbled. We will give them nothing but pain. Orion nodded, his gaze hardening. Valhalla, what's our status? Defenses at 67% capacity, the AI reported. Power reserves critical. Recommend. Valhalla's voice cut off suddenly, replaced by a harsh, blaring alarm. Enemy fleet detected, the AI intoned. Multiple warships entering the system. Vorthak designation confirmed. Orion's blood ran cold. He turned to the display, his eyes widening as the massive Vorthak armada appeared on the screen. Battleships, cruisers, fighter swarms, an entire fleet descending upon the moon like a swarm of locusts. They're here, he whispered. The first Vorthak ships broke through the lunar atmosphere, their sleek, obsidian hulls glinting in the pale light. Energy cannons flared to life, streaks of crimson and violet fire cutting through the darkness as they rained destruction down on the outpost. Take cover! Orion shouted, diving behind a reinforced barricade as explosions rocked the ground. Debris rained down around him, and the lunar surface shuddered under the impact of the bombardment. "Return fire!" he roared, his voice carrying over the chaos. The outpost turrets blazed to life, spitting beams of energy at the descending Vorthak craft. Atlas, Ares, and Athena charged forward, their heavy weapons tearing through the enemy ranks. The air crackled with energy as the first wave of Vorthak soldiers hit the ground, their insectoid forms swarming toward the outpost's defenses. Orion's blade ignited with a brilliant flash, and he leapt into the fray, cutting through the enemy ranks with brutal efficiency. Around him, the war machines roared, their cannons and plasma blades carving a path of destruction through the Vorthak hordes. But for every Vorthak that fell, 10 more took its place. "We're being overwhelmed," Ares bellowed, his massive frame shaking as he tore through a group of attackers. "We can't hold them! Hold the line!" Orion snarled, slashing through a Vorthak soldier's chest. "We have to—" The ground trembled violently, and Orion's heart sank as a massive Vorthak battleship descended toward the outpost, its cannons glowing with ominous light. "Valhalla!" Orion shouted. "Divert all power to the shields! Now!" But it was too late. The battleship's cannons fired, a blinding beam of energy lancing down toward the outpost. Orion braced himself for impact, but just as the beam descended, a massive metal form surged forward, its towering frame absorbing the blast. "Atlas! No!" Orion roared. The war machine shuddered under the impact, his armor buckling and melting as the energy tore through him, but he stood firm, his massive body shielding the outpost from the worst of the blast. "Guardian, protect Earth!" Atlas rumbled, his voice fading. And then, with a final defiant roar, Atlas exploded, the shockwave tearing through the Vorthak ranks and obliterating the battleship in a burst of fire and metal. Silence fell over the battlefield as the dust settled. Atlas was gone. Orion stood frozen, his blade lowered, as he stared at the empty space where his comrade had stood. "Atlas," he whispered, but there was no time to mourn. The Vorthak were still coming. "Fall back!" he shouted, his voice hoarse. "Regroup at the inner defenses. We'll make our stand there." As the remaining war machines rallied around him, Orion turned to face the advancing Vorthak army, his heart burning with rage and sorrow. "You want Earth?" he growled, raising his blade. "Then come and take it." The lunar surface was a hellscape of fire and death. Vorthak troops swarmed across the battlefield like a tidal wave, their chitinous armor glistening under the harsh lights of the outpost's remaining defenses. Explosions rocked the ground as Orion and his allies fought desperately to hold their position. The old fortifications were crumbling, the air filled with the stench of scorched metal and the cries of the dying. Orion's blade flashed as he cut through a squad of Vorthak warriors, the energy field humming with lethal power. Each swing was a blur of motion, cleaving through alien armor and flesh with ruthless precision. But no matter how many he killed, more kept coming. "Hold the line!" Orion shouted, his voice hoarse over the roar of battle. "Don't let them break through." Beside him, the remaining war machines, Ares and Athena, fought with unmatched ferocity. Ares' cannons thundered, hurling massive plasma bolts into the enemy ranks, while Athena's nimble frame darted between the attackers, her twin energy blades slicing through anything that came near. But they were outnumbered, and the Vorthak knew it. "Orion!" Athena called out, her voice tinged with desperation. "Our defenses are failing. We can't keep this up." Orion gritted his teeth, his muscles burning with exhaustion. He glanced up at the massive Vorthak warships circling overhead, their dark forms blocking out the stars. The outpost's shields were barely holding, flickering with every impact from the enemy's bombardment. "We can't let them breach the command center," he growled. "If they get inside, it's over." But even as he spoke, a squad of Vorthak warriors broke through the outer defenses, their shrieking war cries piercing the air. Orion turned to intercept them, his blade cutting a deadly arc through the closest soldier. But the others surged forward, claws slashing. "No!" he roared, lunging to block them. But he was too late. The Vorthak crashed into the inner barricades, overwhelming the human-made defenses with sheer numbers. They were pouring into the heart of the outpost, and there was nothing Orion could do to stop them. "Fall back to the command center," Orion ordered, his voice carrying over the chaos. "We make our stand there." Ares turned his massive frame, his cannons blazing as he covered the retreat. The war machine's armor was scarred and blackened, chunks of metal torn away by the relentless enemy fire. But he fought on, his every movement radiating grim determination. "Go!" Ares rumbled, his voice deep and resonant. "I'll hold them off." Orion froze. "No, Ares, we fall back together." "There's no time," Ares replied calmly, his red eyes glowing fiercely. If we don't stop them here, they'll overwhelm the command center. You have to go, Orion. The Vorthak were closing in, swarming around the war machine like ants. Orion clenched his fists, his heart pounding with a mix of rage and helplessness. But he knew Ares was right. If they lost the command center, they would lose everything. Thank you, my friend, Orion whispered. Ares turned his gaze to him, the red glow of his eyes softening for just a moment. For Earth, he rumbled. And then he charged forward, his cannons blazing. The ground shook as he plowed into the Vorthak ranks, scattering them like leaves before a storm. Energy blasts tore into his armor. But he didn't stop. He kept moving, his massive frame absorbing the brunt of the enemy's firepower. Orion! Now! Athena shouted, pulling him back. With a last anguished glance, Orion turned and sprinted toward the command center, his heart heavy. Behind him, Ares let out a deafening roar, his cannons overloading as he unleashed a massive explosion. The shockwave tore through the Vorthak horde, vaporizing dozens of soldiers in a blinding burst of light. And then Ares was gone. The command center's reinforced doors slammed shut behind Orion and Athena, the heavy metal plates sealing them in. The walls shuddered as the Vorthak pounded on the barriers, trying to break through. Orion leaned heavily against the wall, his chest heaving. We can't hold them off like this, he muttered. Not without Ares. Athena stepped forward, her slender frame trembling with suppressed rage. Then we make them pay for every inch, she said fiercely. For Atlas, for Ares, for Earth. Orion nodded slowly. There was no turning back now. They would fight to the last breath, even if it meant their deaths. Valhalla, activate the last line of defenses, Orion ordered, his voice steady. Confirmed, the AI responded. Activating final defense protocols. Power rerouted to command center shields. The walls around them hummed as the outpost's remaining energy reserves were channeled into a single powerful force field. Outside, the Vorthak pounded against the barrier, their shrieks of frustration filling the air. Orion took a deep breath, his gaze hardening. We'll hold them here. We have to. But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. They were out of time. The Vorthak wouldn't stop until the outpost, and everything it stood for, was reduced to ash. We need something more, he murmured. Something they won't expect. Athena looked at him sharply. What do you mean? Orion turned to the central console, his eyes narrowing. Valhalla, do we have any dormant weapons left? Anything from the old days? The AI hesitated, then responded. One system remains functional. Project designation, Hammerfall. Hammerfall? Orion frowned. The name was unfamiliar, but something about it tugged at the edges of his memory. What is it? Athena asked. A planetary defense system, Valhalla explained, designed to channel the station's entire energy output into a single, concentrated strike, capable of catastrophic damage. Orion's eyes widened. You're telling me we have a super weapon? Affirmative, Valhalla replied. But activating Hammerfall will drain all remaining power reserves. The station's defenses will fail. A heavy silence fell over the room. It's our only chance, Orion said quietly. If we can take out their flagship, we can break their formation, force them to retreat. And if it doesn't work? Athena asked softly. Then we die, Orion replied, his gaze unwavering. But we take as many of them with us as we can. Do it, Orion ordered. The lights in the command center flickered, the hum of machinery growing louder as the outpost's systems rerouted power. Outside, the Vorthak continued their assault, unaware of the weapon that was coming online beneath their feet. Targeting coordinates locked, Valhalla intoned. Hammerfall system charging. Orion and Athena stood side by side, watching as the massive energy capacitors began to glow, their light filling the room with an eerie blue radiance. This is it, Athena whispered. Orion nodded. For Earth, he murmured. The charging sequence reached its peak, the air crackling with raw power. And then, with a blinding flash, a beam of pure energy lanced out from the heart of the outpost, arcing up into the sky. The Vorthak flagship, hovering ominously above the battlefield, shuddered as the beam struck it. The ship's shields flared, struggling to contain the massive surge of energy. But it was too much. The flagship's hull cracked, glowing fissures spreading across its surface as the Hammerfall beam tore through it. With a deafening roar, the ship exploded, a shockwave of fire and debris rippling across the battlefield. The Vorthak forces below faltered, their shrieks of rage and fear filling the air. Without their command ship, they were disorganized, leaderless. They're breaking, Athena shouted. It's working! Orion watched as the Vorthak forces wavered, then began to retreat. The remaining ships turned and fled, leaving the shattered remains of the outpost behind. We did it, Athena breathed, disbelief coloring her voice. But Orion's gaze was distant, his jaw clenched. It's not over yet. As the dust settled, Orion turned to the central console. Valhalla, scan for the Vorthak High Lord's signal. Scanning, the AI replied. After a moment, It continued. Signal detected. The Vorthak High Lord's personal shuttle has landed on the far side of the base. Orion's eyes narrowed. He's here. Athena stepped forward, her eyes blazing. Then let's finish this. Orion nodded, his grip tightening on his blade. Together, they strode out of the command center, the lunar landscape stretching out before them. The High Lord was waiting. As they approached the Vorthak leader, a towering figure clad in dark armor, the moon's surface seemed to tremble beneath his gaze. This was it. The final battle. The fate of Earth's legacy would be decided here. Come, human, the High Lord sneered, his voice echoing across the barren landscape. Let's see if you're worthy of your title. Orion raised his blade, his expression cold and unyielding. I'm not fighting for a title, he growled. I'm fighting for my people. The cold, desolate landscape of the moon stretched out in all directions, the silence broken only by the distant echoes of the retreating Vorthak forces. But here, in the shadow of the ruined outpost, two figures stood facing each other, two titans, each representing the fate of a shattered world. Orion's breath misted in the frigid air as he stared at the Vorthak High Lord. The alien warlord was massive, towering over Orion in his dark, jagged armor. His eyes, glowing a malevolent red, bored into Orion with a hatred that seemed to burn brighter than the stars themselves. You've been a thorn in my side for too long, human, the High Lord sneered, his voice a deep, rumbling growl. Did you really think you could stand against the might of the Vorthak? Orion's grip tightened on his blade. I've already killed more of your kind than I can count, he replied coldly. One more won't make a difference. The High Lord laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Arrogant to the end. How fitting that the last human dies here, alone, on the grave of his people. Orion's eyes flashed. I'm not alone, he growled, glancing to the side where Athena stood beside him, her twin energy blades blazing with blue light. Though battered and damaged, the war machine still radiated defiance. And as long as one human still stands, will never be forgotten, he finished. The High Lord's gaze shifted to Athena, then back to Orion. His smile widened, sharp and predatory. Then let's end this, Guardian of Earth. With a roar, the High Lord charged, his massive war axe cleaving through the air. Orion ducked and rolled, his blade flashing as he parried the strike, sparks flying from the impact. He lunged forward, his sword slashing at the High Lord's side, but the alien was fast, faster than anything Orion had faced before. The two combatants danced across the lunar surface, their weapons blazing with lethal energy. Each strike was a blur of motion, each blow a testament to their skill and strength. But the High Lord was relentless, his attacks hammering down on Orion with the force of a storm. Orion gritted his teeth, his muscles straining as he blocked another devastating blow. His armor, already damaged, was beginning to crack under the pressure. He was strong, but the High Lord was stronger. Is this all you have? The High Lord mocked, his axe swinging down in a brutal arc. Orion dodged, narrowly avoiding the strike. I'm just getting started. With a surge of energy, he leapt forward, his blade slicing through the High Lord's armor. The alien let out a bellow of rage, his eyes blazing as he backhanded Orion, sending him crashing into the ground. For a moment, everything went black. Orion's head spun, his vision blurring. But as he struggled to his feet, a soft voice crackled through his comms. Orion, don't give up. It was Athena, her voice faint but steady. We're fighting for more than just ourselves. We're fighting for all of them, for everyone who came before us. Orion's vision cleared, his resolve hardening. Yes, this was more than just vengeance. This was about preserving what humanity had stood for, about showing the universe that even in death, humanity's spirit would never be broken. He rose to his feet, his gaze locking onto the High Lord. For Earth, he whispered, raising his blade, and then he charged. The High Lord met him head-on, his axe swinging in a deadly arc. Orion ducked under the blow, his blade flashing up to slice through the alien's arm. The High Lord howled in pain, but Orion didn't stop. He drove forward, his strikes coming faster and faster, pushing the alien warlord back. For every human you slaughtered, he snarled, his blade carving a path through the High Lord's armor. For every world you burned, the High Lord roared, his axe swinging wildly. But Orion was relentless. He sidestepped the blow, his sword piercing through the alien's chest in a burst of energy. And for Earth, he whispered. With a final savage twist, Orion ripped his blade free. The High Lord staggered, his eyes wide with shock and fury. And then, slowly, he crumpled to the ground, his body collapsing in a heap of dark armor and blood. Orion stood over him, his chest heaving. The battle was over. The Vorthak High Lord, the leader of the race that had sought to erase humanity, was dead. But as he looked down at the broken body, A strange emptiness filled him. He had done it. He had avenged his people. But at what cost? The moon's surface was littered with the wreckage of his allies, his friends. Atlas was gone. Ares was gone. And Athena. Orion turned, his heart clenching. Athena stood a few feet away, her body sparking and shuddering. Her once proud frame was cracked and broken, her blades flickering weakly. "Athena," he whispered, rushing to her side. She looked up at him, her eyes dimming. "Orion, we did it." Orion knelt beside her, his hands shaking. "Yes, we did," he murmured. "We saved Earth's legacy. But Athena's eyes fluttered shut, her body slumping forward. "No," Orion whispered, his voice breaking. "No, Athena, stay with me." But it was too late. With a final shuddering breath, Athena's systems went dark. The last of the Vanguard war machines was gone. Orion bowed his head, grief washing over him. He had won, but he had lost everything in the process. For a long time, Orion knelt there in silence, his mind numb. The Vorthak were broken, their fleet shattered. The outpost was still standing. He had protected Earth's legacy, but he was alone. Truly, utterly alone. Slowly, he rose to his feet, his gaze drifting to the ruins of the outpost. Everything he had fought for was here. In this place, the memories, the history, the honor of humanity. But what did it matter if there was no one left to carry it forward? A thought flickered through his mind, a dark, dangerous thought. What if he let it go? What if he allowed himself to join his fallen comrades, to rest, at last? No, he thought fiercely. I can't. I won't. Earth's legacy still mattered. Humanity's spirit still mattered. As long as there was even one being who remembered, who fought, then humanity would never truly be gone. With a deep breath, Orion turned his gaze to the stars. There were other worlds out there, other beings who might still remember what it meant to be human. He would find them. He would teach them. Because as long as one warrior stood, humanity would never be forgotten. Orion stood on the lunar surface, staring out at the Earth hanging in the sky above him. It was a broken, scarred world, but it was still beautiful, still worth fighting for. He raised his blade, its edge gleaming in the pale light, and saluted. "For Earth," he whispered. Then, with a final look at the ruins of Lunar Station Alpha, he turned and began to walk away. There was more work to be done, more battles to be fought, and he would fight them, no matter how long it took, because he was Orion, guardian of Earth, the last human, and as long as he stood, humanity would endure. Years later, in the dark, empty corners of the galaxy, whispers began to spread, whispers of a lone warrior, a human who had defied the might of an empire, a being who fought not for vengeance but for honor, for a memory. They called him the Guardian, the last human, and as long as the stories were told, as long as the legends lived on, humanity's spirit would never die.